Hey everyone, Josh here, Wargaming Noob Historical, back with another read-through review, this time around Black Powder Glory Hallelujah. If you are playing American Civil War for Black Powder, this is the supplement that you will need in order to do so. As with all of my read-through reviews, these do take a little while, so if you don't want to watch this at normal speed, you can modify the speed to 1.25 or 1.5, and then you'll get through it a lot faster. I'm going to go through the entire supplement. We'll briefly look at everything that is in the supplement, and then that'll be it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start the read-through review. So we have some wonderful studio models from Warlord here. This supplement was written by Dr. David B. James. Obviously, you're going to have your introduction here by Dr. James with some acknowledgments, and then the meat of the book is the contents. So, it's broken down in a few sections here. It can't be long now. The American Civil War, the armies, raising and uniforming your armies, first modern war weapons, how the armies fought, and then at that point you're going to go into the rules. So that whole first section is informational, gives you the background to both of the armies involved in the conflict, how they would normally be raised, and how they were uniformed. Again, an analysis on whether or not the American Civil War could be considered the first modern war in military history. We get into how the armies fought from the infantry, cavalry, and artillery, and then we finally get into the rules section of the book. So starting with optional rules, then the famous commanders of both the Union and Confederates, your army lists, your famous units and formations, forts, marine and riverine aspects, the scenarios, which is how you play ACW in Black Powder, and then final thoughts, as well as section on how to wargame in 15mm scale, a special rule summary. So, moving forward, can't be long now. It's really just some information, some background leading up to the war. You got information on what led to the American Civil War, the map of the Union and the Confederacy, and really there's a lot of information to go through, especially if you are not familiar with the American Civil War. You might want to briefly go through this section. We now move on to the armies, the regular Army of the United States. And then the raising and uniforming of your armies. Again, this is all background information, especially for those of you who are not familiar with the American Civil War. This could be useful in getting you into the thought process of how the American Civil War played out, how the whole conflict arose, as well as, just background information on stuff that you wouldn't normally know if you were not from the U.S. Again, that's the Union Army uniform. Some information on the uniforms and how they were different in each state. We move on to the Confederate section of the uniforms. Talk about the Zouaves here, and the units or regiments that were formed of Zouaves on both sides of the conflict. Flags and colors. And again, this is a very dense section of the book that provides a lot of information on the American Civil War. Here is a table of more specific battles and the casualties that were recorded from each of them in comparison to the Napoleonic Wars. That's an interesting table. Again, some more studio models. Then some information on the weapons, a smoothbore, which was used heavily in the beginning of the war. Everything moved over to rifled muskets later on. And again, the American Civil War did introduce modern technology as it pertains to U.S. military. Minié ball, which was quite devastating, breech loaders and repeaters, machine guns, the artillery, as well as the different types of shot that were used in Civil War era artillery. Here are some stats on the ranges of the artillery. I'm just going to leave this on the screen for a little bit. And some information on how the armies fought. Again, a great shot of studio models there. This talks about the role of skirmishers, cavalry, the artillery, counter battery defense, and then some optional rules for the battlefield. So, orchard, light woods, heavy woods, and swamps. Cornfields, there's a disorientation rule, cover rules. Here we have the army, so infantry and formations, cavalry. Here's some stats on cavalry, and again later on in the book they'll show the full stats for every unit. Some information on, I guess, cavalry, or how units move through each other. So you have information on firefights, the special rule, pour it on boys for smooth bores, breech loaders, repeating and magazine-fed weapons. Here's some ranges for the weapons in the book. Information, the special rule, whipped. Go on to the charge. And then we have the section on the generals, the divisional commanders. I guess some vulnerability of the commanders. What does it say here? On page 86 of the Black Powder Rules, the vulnerability of commanders is outlined. So a lot of commanders in this conflict were killed or wounded. So that's probably why they pay special attention to this. Snipers, replacement commanders, bonus attacks from commanders. Some additional useful rules, so Rebel Yell, which is for the Confederates. Seeing the Elephant and Uppity. There's a summary of all the useful rules, so just a great way to collect all of that into one page. I would print this out when I start playing ACW. So we move on to the section of famous commanders. A lot of the commanders are well known. So for the Union, we have McClellan. He has a couple special rules here. He has a staff rating of 8, but has hesitant. If he successfully issues an order resulting in 3 moves, then he must re-roll and abide by the second result. So he does get penalized if he doesn't roll the same roll for movement. He can't join a unit at any point in the game, and he cannot issue the order rally on me, follow me, or assist in hand-to-hand combat. And then it goes into the question of why you even use McClellan. McClellan repeatedly overestimated the strength of Confederate forces opposing him and would only move his army once he was content that he had sufficient force for the task at hand. He achieved this by repeatedly asking the government for more troops, even though the reality was often that he actually had overwhelming forces. To reflect McClellan's pestering for more troops while he's the commander, before embarking on any operations, we allow a Union army with McClellan as its commander to field an extra infantry brigade, even in games where points have been used to determine the army's relative strength. So that's an interesting way to offset his hesitant special rule. Also, that brigade cannot be the largest in the army and can't comprise more than 4 regiments. This brigade is drawn from the normal 1862 Eastern Theater list. It must be commanded by an ordinary general with command rating of 8 and no characteristics, and then has the following stats right here. So in addition to that, the above brigade cannot advance past the halfway point on the table because McClellan is holding it back, just in case he costs 100 points. So that's a lot of text for McClellan, but it does give you an insight into why he failed as the overall commander of the Union Army during the first part of the war. So we move on to Grant. Again, a lot of text for his special rule, so I'll just try to go through it briefly. He has a command rating of 8 in 1862, rising to 9 for the remainder of the war as he gains experience and confidence. So if you use Grant in the early part of the war, then he'll be command rating 8, but as you move forward in the campaign or in the war, you're playing battles later on, then he'll have a command rating of 9. He also has decisive, so that he can re-roll any failed order, and if he fails again, then it is treated as a blunder. Grant was able to remain very cool at times of crisis, and to reflect this, he has a special rule: Grant don't scare worth a damn. Brigades under Grant, either his own or the entire army, if he is the commander-in-chief, will become broken once they have suffered more than half losses. If Grant is the commander-in-chief, the above applies not only to the brigades under his command, but also the entire army. The army will only be broken when more than half the brigades are broken. He costs 90 points if you use them in the earlier part of the war, and he's 120 from 1863 and beyond, so for the latter half of the war. We have Sherman. So you can use Sherman as a brigade commander with a staff rating of 8 if you are playing Eastern Theater 1861. He can be fielded as commander-in-chief or a divisional commander when you are playing up to 1863. And then from 1864, he is commander-in-chief. He has a staff rating of 9 at that point and is decisive. He can reroll any failed command check. If he fails again, the result is always a blunder. He costs 90 points. Next, we have Custer. He can be fielded as a brigade commander at the head of a Union cavalry in 1863 or as a divisional commander in 1864 and beyond. Custer has a staff rating of 8 and is aggressive. He gets a +1 modifier when giving an order to charge. He's also headstrong, allowing further +1 if he is the first to issue orders that turn. He costs 75 points. Move on to the Confederate commanders. We have Lee. He has a staff rating of 10 up to 1863. And then after 1863, so if you're playing 1864 or 1865, he will have a command rating of 9. So Lee was worshipped by his men and referred to in reverential tones. His mere presence on the field can imbue the men with confidence. To reflect this, any Confederate unit that tests morale within 12 inches of Lee may reroll a failed test. So even though Lee was highly revered, they say that there is a negative aspect to it. If he issues a rally order within 12 of the enemy, roll a single die and a score of 4 up, then the unit in question will retire one move and Lee must go with them. Similarly, if Lee tries to lead a unit in melee, throw a die before they charge on a 3 up, they will retire one move instead of charging. So I do like that they have a negative to this reverence that they have for Lee, because they really don't want him, at least in terms of gameplay and historicity, to be with his men as they charge forward because they want to protect him. So that's an interesting way of playing that. So Robert E. Lee. So Lee will cost 120 points up to June 1863. After that, he drops down to 100 based on his deteriorating health. Right, next up we have Jackson, Stonewall Jackson. So he has a staff rating of 9 and has decisive. In addition, any unit within 12 inches of Jackson will be inspired by the sight of him and that they may re-roll any failed break test. He costs 90 points. We have Longstreet. He can be fielded by an Eastern Confederate Army from 1862 as a corps commander or commander-in-chief. He has a command rating of 8, but is extremely reliable and can be treated as decisive as outlined on page 95 of the main rules. Due to this, they do modify it. If he fails a command check, then the reroll is only a blunder. If he rolls a 12, Longstreet makes mistakes, but rarely very bad ones. He costs 85 points. Next we have Bragg. He has a staff rating of 8 and may not issue a follow me or rally on me, since he was generally despised by the army, and he costs 65 points. Next up we have Forrest. He's only permitted in Western Theater armies and should be placed in command of a cavalry brigade or division. He may add 2 die to a unit he is with in hand-to-hand combat. He has a staff rating of 9 and is aggressive. Gets +1 when he issues an order to charge. He's also headstrong, allowing a further +1 if he is the first to issue that order. First to issue orders that turn. Costs 90 points. We then have Jeb Stuart. He is only permitted in Eastern armies and can be placed in command of a cavalry brigade or division. He has a staff rating of 9 and is aggressive, allowing a +1 when he issues orders in a charge. And he also gets the headstrong rule, which gives him another +1 if he is the first to issue order. We have Hood. He can be named as a brigade commander in the Eastern Theater in 1862 and 63, and commander-in-chief in 1863. Also from 1863, he can be used in the Western Theater as a commander-in-chief. He has a staff rating of 8. He's aggressive. Gets a +1 when he issues an order to charge. He's also headstrong. Again, plus a further +1 if he's the first to issue orders. He's 80 points. All right, so we'll keep going. We get to the meat of the book with the army lists. So just some information on the infantry and cavalry brigades and divisions, artillery, and then legions. The Confederacy did use what were termed legions. They're combined armed brigades. And then by mid-1862, many of these legions had been broken up and their component units had moved into other brigades of the same troop type. So for the early part of the war, you can use the legions for the Confederacy. Then you have corps, marauders, unit size, brigade character and morale. Points values for some abilities here. Pour It On, Rebel Yell, Seeing the Elephant, United States Colored Troops, Uppity, Breech Loading Rifle or Carbine, Repeating Carbine or Rifle, 6-gun battery, Horse Artillery, Howitzer Battery, and your generals and commanders, and then the summary. So Eastern Theater, this is 1861. Nation learns to fight the Union. These are the stats and the staff ratings. So staff rating of 6 will cost 40, 760, and 870. And then the stats for the infantry right here. Stats for the cavalry. There's some special rules, only 1 per regiment, so keep that in mind. And then the Confederates, the gifted amateurs, staff rating of 7 is 60 points, 8 is 70, and 9 is 85. And here's the infantry and cavalry and artillery stats, as well as special rules. Again, only 1 per regiment. Some more studio models. We move on to 1862. The Union learns, so the staff rating is 6. Staff ratings of 7 is 60 points. 870, 985. And again, stats for infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Special rules. Confederate, the year of victories. Staff rating 7 is 60, 8 is 70, 9 is 85, and again, stats. Special rules. Then 1863, the peak of the war. So the Union resurgent. Staff ratings 7, 8, and 9, so 60, 70, and 85. Stats and special rules. The Zenith for the Confederates, again, staff rating 7, 8, and 9, 60, 70, and 85 points. And stats for infantry, cavalry, and artillery, as well as special rules. Here we go to the tide turn. Union Grant takes command. So again, the staff ratings, same point totals. The infantry, cavalry, artillery stats, and the special rules. Confederates on the defensive, the staff ratings are the same, and then the stats for infantry, cavalry, artillery, as well as special rules. And then we move on to 1865, the final part of the war, the final year. We have Union, the Behemoth. The staff ratings are the same, and same point cost. We have infantry, cavalry, artillery stats, special rules. And then Noble and Defeat for the Confederates, the same staff rating and costs. And then you have your stats for infantry, cavalry, artillery, as well as special rules. So we move to the Western Theater. This is 1861, the Backwaters. So here you get a staff rating as low as 6 and as high as 9 with 40, 60, 70, and 85 point totals. Stats for infantry, cavalry, and artillery, as well as special rules. Then the early successes for Confederates, again, as low as staff rating 6 to as high as 9. Same point totals. There's your stats and special rules. Then Bloody Shiloh, Union unvanquished. Staff ratings the same with the points. Stats for infantry, cavalry, artillery, special rules. Confederate, triumphant, same staff ratings and costs, infantry, cavalry, artillery stats, as well as special rules. Then 1863, splitting Dixie, the Union pushes on. You start as low as staff rating 7 to as high as 9 with the similar point totals, infantry, cavalry, artillery, and special rules. Confederates on the back foot, same staff ratings and costs, infantry, cavalry, artillery, and special rules. Then we move on to 1864, War is Hell for the Union, same staff ratings and point totals, stats are the same, or similar. Stats for infantry, cavalry, artillery, as well as special rules. And then Confederate Desperation, same staff ratings, you got stats and special rules. And then Crushing the South, 1865, Union Unstoppable, staff rating, and your infantry, cavalry, artillery stats and special rules. Then Confederate Scraping the Barrel, staff rating is the same, point total is the same as your stats and special rules. And then we move on to famous units and formations. So for the Union, you have rules for the Iron Brigade, as well as stats and special rules. The Irish Brigade, Union Regulars, and then Custer's Wolverines, 11 Corps, the Flying Dutchman, Union Naval Landing Parties, and then the Colored Troops, epitomized by the movie Glory, if you've ever seen that, or studio models. For on the Confederate side, Jackson's Command, Stonewall Brigade, 1861 to 62, Jackson's Foot Cavalry in the Shenandoah Valley. You have the Texas Brigade of the ANV, 1862 to 1863, and then 1864 and beyond. Longstreet's Corps in 1863. That includes Barksdale's Mississippians in 1863, Pickett's Division in 1863, the Elite Infantry Brigades of the Army of Northern Virginia. You have Jenkins Mounted Infantry, the Confederate Cavalry. Then you have guerrillas, rangers, partisans, and bushwhackers. Some more studio models. You have rules for forts. We'll go through that real quick. Then you have rules for marine and riverine aspects of the game. There are some stats for ironclads and gunboats. We have the Altar Freedom Letter written to Mrs. Lydia Bixby of Boston from Abraham Lincoln, immortalized in the Saving Private Ryan movie. More studio models. So we get onto the campaign scenarios. You have the Battle of Wilson's Creek, 1861. Some information on terrain and deployment. The makeup of the Confederate Army under Brigadier General Ben McCulloch. And then the Union Army under Brigadier General Lyon. Summary of how it played with the Warlord guys. Then you have the Assault on Fort Wright, 1862. Terrain and deployment. Here's the Confederate Army for the garrison of Fort Wright. And then the Union Army. How it played. We have Iuka, 1862. Terrain deployment and special rules. The Confederate Army of the West under Major General Sterling Price, and then the Union Army of the Mississippi under Major General Rosecrans. Salem Church, 1863, terrain deployment and special rules. McLaws Division, the Confederate Army. And then the Union Army, 6th Corps, Army of the Potomac under Major General John Sedgwick. Then we have Gettysburg Part 1, the destruction of 1st Division, 1st Corps. You have terrain deployment and special rules. Confederate Army under Major General Henry Heath. And then the Union Army under Major General Reynolds. Here's Gettysburg Part 2, to hold a hill. Terrain deployment and special rules. The Confederate Army under Major General Johnson. And the Union Army under Major General Slocum. Then Gettysburg, it can't be long now. Deployment, terrain, and special rules. There's a lot of them. Confederate Army, Pickett's Division. Pettigrew's Division. Trimble's Division. And then the Union Army, 1st Corps, 2nd Division, 3rd Division. 2nd Corps, 1st Division. 2nd Division, and 3rd Division. Then you have 3rd Corps, 2nd Division, Union Artillery. Next we have Bartlett's Farm, terrain deployment, Confederate Army under General Scott. And then you have the Union Army. How it played. Then New Market, 1864, terrain and deployment. The Confederate Army under Major General John Breckinridge. Union Army under Major General Franz Sigel. That's how it played. And then we have the Battle of Monocacy, July 9th, 1864. Terrain deployment and special rules. The Confederate Army under Major General John C. Breckinridge. And then the Union Army under Major General Lew Wallace. And then we get to the section of final thoughts, what remains, the war on the big screen. So just a number of movies that you can watch to kind of give you some background and thematic elements to your gameplay. And then obviously bibliography, as well as playing this supplement in 15mm. Here's the special rule summary. And we've reached the end of the supplement. So I'm just going to go back to the cover page here. Alright, so that is it. Black Powder, Glory, Hallelujah. The supplement to have if you're playing the American Civil War in Black Powder. Again, a very dense supplement. Has a lot of information and background to the American Civil War, as well as all the special rules that are related to it in terms of gameplay for Black Powder. If you are not familiar with the American Civil War, and this is for basically the audience outside of the United States, then this is a great way to get information and background on the conflict itself. For those of us who grew up studying the Civil War, this just gives further detail that'll allow us to play this conflict out on the game table. So a highly recommended supplement if you are going to play American Civil War. Again, very dense, and there's just a lot of information. So any supplement like that has a lot of background information, I feel is a strong supplement to have, especially if you are a war gamer, and especially for Black Powder, as it applies to the main gameplay itself. Alright, that is it. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I appreciate it if you would. Click the bell notification icon to get notified of all new read-through reviews coming out of the channel. And then click the link in the description below to join our Discord server. That is the best way I could personally interact with you and chit-chat you about Black Powder and any other game that I cover on the channel. That's it. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more read-through reviews from Wargaming New Historical.